And I did want to, before if we do get into Romans, great, but a couple of weeks ago, last week, of course, we had the Haiti presentation and everything like that, and we were talking about defending what we do and what we believe. And I had several come up to me afterwards and say, hey, are we going to go back to that? Are we going to, touch on that? And so I'm going to give you the opportunity. So if there are questions that you had that we didn't address, then you can bring that up. If not, then we're going to go into Romans today. We talked about different things like, why do we have the Lord's Supper? Why do we have it every day? Every Lord's Day. Is Acts 20 verse 7 justification for the Lord's Supper on the first day of the week? So that's a question for you right there to kind of get it going. Let's flip over to Acts chapter 20 verse 7. And this is where we were the last time we were here, and it says, on the first day of the week, when we were gathered together to break bread, Paul began talking to them, intending to leave the next day, and he prolonged his message until midnight. Okay, they were breaking bread. Is that breaking bread as far as a meal, or is it breaking bread as far as communion? It's a reference that on the first day of the week they're worshiping, right? Okay, is that a command there? Okay. You want to add to that? I suppose no. Mm-hmm. Okay. When did he set it up? Okay. Ever heard Thursday? Yeah. Miss Johnny, were you going to say something?
Well, I was thinking about Acts 2, and that's one of the things they did in the first part of the worship.
Yeah, let's go to Acts chapter 2. It was an example, okay? So let's read, I just want to see where I want to go. Okay, let's start in verse 42. I'll read aloud, New American Standard Bible, 1995 update. They were continually devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone kept feeling a sense of awe, and many wonders and signs were taking place through the apostles. And all those who had believed were together and had all things in common. And they began selling their property and possessions and were sharing them with all as anyone might have need. Here's another breaking of the bread here in verse 46. Day by day, continuing with one mind in the temple and breaking bread from house to house, they were taking their meals together with gladness and sincerity of heart, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord was adding to the number day by day those who were being saved. So, Miss Johnny, let me ask you this since you brought it up. Would you say then in verse 42, that is in reference to communion, the Lord's Supper there, where they're doing the singing and praying and everything?
Yeah, I think one of them is.
Okay. What do you think the second one is, Nick? Is it communion or is it breaking of bread like over a meal? I don't know. What is it? Acts chapter 2, verse 42 and then 47. Breaking. Mm-hmm. And you have to look at it in the context because it can be either or. That's really what it is. What's that? Yeah. And it really depends on the context. If you look at it in the first part in 42, what's wrapped around that breaking of the bread? What's wrapped around it? Is it fellowship and prayer? What's that? Apostles' teaching? Okay, what about in 47, Brian? What do you take that to mean? 46, I'm sorry, yes. Okay. How was the Lord's Supper initially? Was it like this? How was it at first? How was the Lord's Supper instituted, implemented, and done? Passover feast. So they just had these trays and some bread sitting up there like that? They weren't gold. No, they were pewter. So what was it about? There was a feast. You said Passover feast. So there was a meal. It was a remembrance. The Passover or the communion? The Lord's Supper. Passover. Okay. Mm-hmm. And what was the purpose of the bread not having leaven? Because they were getting out of Dodge, right? Getting out of where? Egypt, right. Okay. And what is Passover in reference to? Right. Passing over the killing of the firstborn, and you had to have where? The blood where? On the door, right? So some believe that taking of the communion today can only be taken, the fruit of the vine can only be taken by a priest. Okay? And so in most Catholic churches, the priest is the one who takes the wine. Some churches believe that there's just one cup. Should we only have one cup? Because it says, take what? Take one of these little bitty cups from me? No, it says take this cup. Mm-hmm.
So that would sort of be kind of bogus. Just the priest and only the wine, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, and if you really want to get technical, how technical do you get when you say take this cup? It doesn't say take a cup. It says take this cup. Does that mean that's why everybody's still looking for what? The what? The Holy Grail. Yeah, they're looking for that chalice, and that's what people are searching for because, man, and it's just like when they say, and I'll get to you in just a sec, Dave, they get to that, oh, well, this is so-and-so's birthplace, or this is the ossuary of Jesus's bones, or because it says he has a father, named Joseph. People make things into something that's sacred, and that's the danger of it. Mr. Dave? Okay. 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 Yeah, and should we do that on Sundays? Are we straying from Scripture if we divide it beforehand? What do you think, Brian? Is that a sin? But it says take a cup. Why do we take and have the little itty bitty cups? What's that? Hygiene. Because, if I was going to one of these one-cupper churches, I'm determining, okay, are they serving front or back first? But they're tricky. They mix it up. So unless you've got an in with the deacon, you don't know if they're starting in the front or the back. That's why you always want to serve the cup. What's that? Did it for 3 years here at Bellevue? Okay. Not in Bellevue? Has Bellevue always been a little itty-bitty cupper? Okay. Because, that came across from Zwingli, and he just did the wooden trays to make it easier. But as we talked about before, he did that so that, because it wasn't just about the clergy, but he also had the deacons that had the big, long wooden staff with the knurled knobs, and he would go and they would poke people that fell asleep during the sermon. The deacon of poking. What's that? I'm not even going to repeat that. That was so bad. Did they have a table set up at front? They were surrounding the table, correct? Were they standing? Were they sitting? Were they lying down? What, Terry? How did they do it? They were reclining. Is that change that we have like this? Is that okay? Is there a command to lay like they reclined at the table like they did in the first century? Was the communion, you said it's a memorial, right? A remembrance. It's also a proclamation, right? Of the good things that come. We use grape juice, right? What if we used white grape juice? Is that okay? Well, that's what I'm saying. Why don't we use the Why don't you use the good stuff, Rob? Gene, were you going to say something? Fruit of the vine. Okay, so that could be wine. Or white grape juice or purple, red grape juice. Mr. Bill? Are you going to answer this question first? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, and we'll get back to that in just a second, because you don't see that command per se that you shall meet on the first day of the week and partake of the Lord's Supper. What do you see? An example. You have command, you have example, and you have necessary inference, to where you say, okay, by necessary inference, we know that there's fruit of the vine and unleavened bread, right? Well, you don't have the command not to put burgers and, Coca-Cola in there, right? Poor example, but something okay out there? No, Steve's over here. Go ahead, Carol. I just want to make sure somebody's okay back there.
The same denominations that have their communion quarterly, do they feel that taking it every week is improper or inappropriate?
No, I don't. Carol said for those denominations or churches that take it quarterly, do they deem it to be inappropriate, or if they did it weekly? No, the reason they do it quarterly is just because then it carries with it more meaning for a lot of them. It's the same way that they also say that we're going to have baptism once a quarter. I saw a thing in today, the paper, or on something, might have been Twitter, something says, hey, my sister was saved last week and she was baptized today. Let me finish. And she had timed it just right because she didn't have to wait, till the next quarter. Yeah, that was a question. Is the command to give every week? Yeah. Andy said that if the command to give is to give every week, then why wouldn't you do that just every quarter to give it more meaning? Well, and here's the thing. Here's a question that was brought up to me. They set aside, right, to lay aside and store for the first day of the week, right? Well, the question is, can you write a check on the first of the month for the entire month, or do you have to give and set aside for each week and then put something in the tray? Now, you think I'm being facetious, and I'm not. I'm asking you a serious question, because some people feel that they want to give something each week because that's what it says. So is it, if they're budgeting and they get paid on the first of the month and they put that amount in, say, on the first of the month and it goes in, are they being scriptural? Because they put it in the first of the month and the next 3 or 4, and don't even get me started if it's a 5 Sunday month. Is that okay? Raleigh?
I sure hope so, because when we go to Florida, that's what we do, is put it in the time we're going to be on.
Okay. Raleigh says he sure hopes so, because that's what they do when they go to Florida. And I get, if Andy thought it was wrong to do it, then Andy shouldn't do it. I don't think that, you putting it in the first of the month, the third, the fourth, whatever, for the month, how technical do you get? So let me ask you, is it wrong? Do you think it's wrong?
That's the key. When you give, I get hand the check on Wednesday night to Darrell and say, I missed it on Sunday, or it's for next Sunday, or whatever.
Darrell is twitching back there. He'll mess up the books. You'll mess up the books. Yeah, I still take it. So when we look at traditions, such as how we pass out the trays themselves, the cups themselves, the building themselves, wherein does it become an issue to where we hold to traditions more than we hold to maybe not just commands, but examples that we see in scriptures? Because we can get into the habit or get into the pattern of looking at other denominations and people and making judgments on them, as opposed to trying to live our life and seizing the opportunity to teach someone, right? The way we see the truth. When it starts to interfere with your worship to God. Okay. Brian, did you have your hand up? Okay. Well, we're not there yet, but go ahead. Does that make sense?
And I say it like that because when it becomes such that you use the tradition more than you use the command, that's when it's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So if you put so much stock in an act, a portion of service that has been passed down from generation to generation, because that's the way we've always done it, versus we do it because the Bible says to, or there's an example, or there's an instance, that's when it's not.
Miss Johnny? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brian. You have something else? That's the bottom line.
I think we need to put more emphasis on why we're doing this, and that's what you remember the death, burial, and the Lord Jesus Christ. It's not that cup, it's what's in that cup. It's what he gave, his blood. And I believe that's why we should do it each week, because we need to constantly have blood in our lives.
Okay, I want to reiterate that. Miss Johnny said that it's not about whether the cup is gold or plastic or the tray is plastic or gold, but it's about what's in the cup and what it symbolizes. And that now, who can tell me, this is your easy word for the day, what does transubstantiation mean? What's that? Becomes the blood. What becomes the blood? The actual blood? When does it become that? When the priest blesses it, right? Well, when he blesses it and then, he gets the full thing first, so it's already changed before he gets there. Depending on the liturgical style of worship, whether it's Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, it varies. But generally, yes, when it hits your tongue. What does it taste like? Has anybody grown up Catholic that can say, hey, this is what it tasted like? It tasted like blood? It's always the bread, because the priest is the only one that can take the fruit of the vine, right? You put it on your tongue, and it's just that little wafer, and it's that wafer that gets stuck on the roof of your mouth, right? Emma's like, yeah. What? Lisa? I thought you were just pointing at her like, this is my wife. This is Lisa. Hi, Lisa. You grew up Catholic. Sorry. New lips.
And I remember them serving the wine.
You remember them serving the wine. How often? On certain masses? Okay. And I know that some do, but I also know that there's a tendency, and from what last I heard was that it's not every mass, that it's only certain. But, and what's that? Wisconsin, yeah. In fact, they don't have bread, they have cheese curds. Unleavened cheese curds. So we get caught up into things as opposed to worshiping the King, is what Miss Johnny's saying. We can get caught up, and congregations have split over chairs or pews. They've split over, in Texas, one of the elders' wives served another elder a smaller piece of ham than another elder, and that ended up in that church split because they thought that elder's wife was being disrespectful to that elder, and all she did was take the next piece of ham in line. Churches have split over the fact way back when how many of you remember when they started writing checks? When did they start check writing? Personal checks. Trevor, when you write a check and you put it in the... Trev uses his credit card, and we're going to set Trevor up on automatic withdrawals here. So when he goes away to college, we can just take it right out of there. But there was an issue to where people were putting in checks, writing a personal check for their contribution, and churches were saying, no, 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 because you're not putting in an offering. You're putting in a promise to pay. You're putting in an IOU. Maybe, but even so, you know, where do you draw the line? You can get caught up in the little inane things and miss the big things. We have every Sunday morning here at 9:15, I'm sure most of you know, what? Bible class. Where's that scripture? Study to show yourself approved. Yes, ma'am? It's part of fellowshipping. Is it a command? Study yourself approved. It's a teaching. So you can go back to Acts chapter 2:42 then, where they were devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching, where this is the apostles' teaching per se. What's that? 5th and 6th grade. But believe it or not, there are other classes other than 5th and 6th grade, Miss Johnny. Where do we get Sunday schools from? What's the history? Trevor, Ford, you guys are college students. Tell me about this. What? That's next semester. Well played, Trevor. Well played. Ford, do you know? Anybody know? Yeah? Yeah, well, not Reformation, but in England, the poor children were often forced into child labor, so they were uneducated. And they were taken advantage of because they couldn't count, they couldn't read or write, so they would work for basically nothing and sometimes ending up going into debt working for somebody as child labor. So, yeah, messed up, right? It still goes on in the world today. Who knew? And so a gentleman by the name of Robert Raikes, he was a newspaper publisher from Britain in the year, I think I have the year, 1780, founded a school in Scouts Alley, Gloucester. I know it's Gloucestershire, but for poor children, what? Gloucester. The main guy speaks up. Yeah, New England. Yeah, go eat some chowder. Okay. But it wasn't founded for religious instruction. It was founded to teach the kids how to read and write. And then the churches started getting involved, and some of these, kind of like it would be for today, like Campus for Christ or these Crusades for Christ, these organizations said, hey, this is a good way to bring these kids in and indoctrinate them into God's plan. I will teach them to read and write, but we will also indoctrinate them in the Word. So its motivation wasn't to study and find thyself approved or to have fellowship. It was to bring these poor kids in, these underprivileged kids who were being taken advantage of, to teach them to read and write. And then it just kind of evolved into a Bible school to where when they started saying, well, hey, we got this kid here, we got this kid here, this kid here, and then D.L. Moody said, hey, this is really great, let's explode it in the United States, so where they started to bring the kids so they could get their parents and everything. So this was tradition based off of a secular practice. So I ask you, is it right, is it wrong, and do you have to go? Nobody, you don't have to go to Bible school. Okay. You don't have to come to church. But you know what I mean, Jim. Are the elders going to hunt you down and then slash your tires if you don't come to Bible school? No, they won't. Okay.
And in the first century, they went house to house.
Mm-hmm.
Now instead of going to house, we come on Sunday morning.
Yeah, but then we split the church every Sunday morning. Huh? If we're a first century church, why aren't we all in here together? No, we're not. The kids are downstairs, Jim. And Miss Johnny's down there, 5th, 6th grade. For the past, how many years you been teaching, Miss Johnny? Over 50 years. Is that splitting the church? And I'm nitpicking to prove, to get you to think about things, because this is the lengths that some people go. Nick, first century church, where did they meet? In a home, right? Where did they put the kids? Together. But yet we get upset if the kids start talking in church. And I don't mean talking, but like crying, like say Greta had a fit, which she can, especially when Jeremy holds her. It's just sad. But like this morning, she started talking upset. She's like, feed me now. And, they're like, okay, quick, get the bottle. And like a ninja in there, stick that bottle in there in like 2.3 nanoseconds. And then Greta's like, I feel good now. And Roy could continue to teach. But what happens, and I'm using this because baby was beautiful and fine this morning, but what happened if she continued to cry? Should we have the deacon or an usher escort Greta out of the building? Or is she part of the family? Because let's face it, if we're going to be real and honest, some people, a baby crying irritates, right? You put her in the nursery. There you go, separating the church again, Miss Johnny. Why do you want to do that?
God did give us a brain.
God gave us a brain. Okay? To make what? Logical, pragmatic decisions.
Yeah, right. You know, we use this in the principal box. Things out of the box, things in the box.
Things out of the box, things in the box. I have no idea what you're talking about. Okay. Okay.
What's in the box is what's right and good.
Okay, what's in the box is right and good.
When you adjust what's in the box, it's got to correspond with what's already in the box.
Okay? Okay. Okay, so Bible school, Sunday mornings, everybody's okay with? Don't need authorization for that? We do. Where? From the elders. They can be wrong. Trust me, I know one pretty well. Yes, ma'am. Teach and admonish one another. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. It's a positive thing. Okay. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. If we don't know the word. Okay. Well, let me play the antagonist here, just for fun's sake, but I want you to think this through. But by having Sunday morning Bible schools, we've absolved the parents of the responsibility to teach the children at home. Therefore, the kids only get taught when they come on Sunday mornings. That's why we have 75% of the kids leaving the body when they graduate high school. It's because of Sunday school. That's responsibility of the parents. But we've taken that responsibility off of them by giving them Sunday school. And now look at Trevor.
I know, but you have morning class like we have
Mm.
what we talk about in there, these young folks don't know. They need a class to.
Now, when you say young folks, how young are you talking about?
I'm talking about 6, 7, well, even maybe up to 9, 8 or 9 years old.
Okay, so you're saying that what you talk about in the Sunday morning Bible class in the library, the 6 to 10-year-olds don't understand and don't know. Okay,
That's why we have the division there in that high school.
because they couldn't understand what you're talking about in there.
That's right.
Okay, Andy?
I've never heard an elder or deacon or preacher or anybody else say, because we have Sunday school class here, you parents are involved.
No, you don't say that, but it's a given because you say, hey, come here and just let us teach your kids.
Not if you follow God's word. God's word says, parents teach your children.
Okay, maybe they're not saying it, but doesn't it create an environment to where the parents feel they don't have to? You should, but let's be real. In today's society, as a whole, often parents don't do what they should do, right? Would we agree with that? I mean, you can watch TV and see what's on and everything like that, let me just preface before we go Tiffany, then Betty. I'm just trying to get you to think here. I don't want you guys throwing any things like I'm saying this is wrong, because I love Bible school. I come like every Sunday. Tiff, you had your hand up, or were you smacking Roy? Okay. I was wondering why your face is red. Go ahead, Tiff.
Some kids only get Sunday school.
Some kids only get Sunday school.
Maybe their parents aren't believers or will drop them off and won't come themselves.
Wait, Gary. Betty, then Gary. You had your hand up, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was just joking. We'll let the air out. We will not slice. Right. Right, and I agree with what you're saying, but I think even further than that, to do that, but even further is what I just brought up to during the elders and deacons meeting is that library and that TV back there was created and set up for the training of children and their parents, not to be an area of conversation and dialogue. And so we need to do a job to, and I understand that if you come in late or people are sitting back there, and I'm not saying everybody that sits back there is, but there are dialogues that take place back there. There are dialogues to where maybe a parent has a kid back there and the kid is running all over. Well, that's not what that was intended. It's to train them so they can sit in the chairs so that they can be in here for the service, because let's face it, certain kids, maybe they're a little bit more rambunctious than others. Maybe your kids come and they can sit here and be great. Maybe your kid acts up. Maybe Greta starts beating up Jeremy and she has to take him to the back there and to get her calmed down or get him calmed down. And that's what that's for. It's a teaching tool. In the same way, we have a responsibility, not only elders. So I take that and I agree with you on that. But I also think that if your brother or sister's not here or they're not worshiping, that's your responsibility as well. But not absolving the elders of responsibility in any way, shape, or form, but it's all of ours. If Carol, starts saying something bad about Roy to me, I shouldn't have to wait for the elders to say, hey, Carol's bad-mouthing Roy again. I should be able to say to Carol, hey, I love you and I agree with you about Roy, but let's not talk about him, unless he's here. I say that facetiously, but ultimately that responsibility does come from the eldership. And we have that responsibility. If we see a wrong or see somebody not coming or anything like that, yes, that's the responsibility. But we also have that responsibility to, if we see a brother struggling in their walk, to encourage them and to accept the responsibility to take action ourselves, regardless of what it is. Gary, then Carol. Gary, we passed that. No, we didn't. You just couldn't keep up with us. Go ahead, Gary.
There was a time when the Bible was our textbook in school. The textbook has been removed from our school. That's why we have problems with the idea of the Bible into the classroom in the secular world. So the only place other than the home is right here. That's why we established these classrooms in the divisions of the grade levels.
Because kids learn at different levels, like Jim said, they couldn't learn in Rick's class.
was 200 years ago. There was no television or radio, but there was the family Bible.
Okay.
And if God-fearing people tried to stay close to God, they would have a reading before bedtime for their children, for each other.
Okay.
And also the deaths and the marriages and the births were all recorded in the family Bible.
Okay.
And my grandfather had such a book.
Okay.
But of course, we don't have that because we have all this other that is pushing aside our time.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have the time supposedly because there's a program we have to listen to a lot.
Okay. I don't know if you guys heard what Carol said, so I'm just going to kind of brief it down. Carol said about over 200 years ago, when Jim was in elementary school, they didn't have TVs or radios. They only had the family Bible. And in all seriousness, so the Bible was the central point of a home. So there would be a nightly reading before bed or even at dinner time. And they would record all the baptisms and the births and the deaths and the marriages. They probably, I would bet they probably didn't even have a page for divorces in there. I don't know. Does a family Bible now have pages for divorce in there? Or do they? I don't know. But, and it was the focal point to where they got the Bible in the home a lot more. And the part is we can't rely on, Omaha Public Schools or Plattsmouth or Platteview or Millard Public Schools to teach our children God's Word. We can't even require or expect our Sunday school Bible teachers to be the only ones teaching our children. That comes, like you said, ma'am, from ourselves and that responsibility. From, me training my kids, from, Carol and Jeremy teaching Greta, everybody training their kids up at home and taking advantage of the situation when we have them at home. And they have to listen to us. Because we get to say that as long as you're in my house, you will follow my rules. Andy?
Let's not take Satan out of this picture here. Satan is part of the secular world out there. And, it used to be Sundays and Wednesdays were pretty much reserved for church-going people. Schools didn't schedule anything.
Oh, yeah.
Now you look at the schedule, and you can find something scheduled for your kid every single day of the week, sometimes 3 or 4 times a day.
Yeah.
And it depends on where the parent is in his relationship with Christ as to whether they're going to be in church or whether they're going to be on a soccer field or whether they're going to be somewhere else.
Absolutely.
Sunday morning or Wednesday night.
But even take the extracurricular activities out. We put the blame on having, 2 parents working. That's not really the blame either. It's because there's 2 parents that work and raise kids that are dedicated and on fire and passionate for God, and they're here and they're teaching their kids. And, it really just comes down to an individual person and their individual responsibility for themselves and their children in studying God's Word and teaching not only their children, but those they come in contact with. The key is that as we look at the different things, whether, as Brian says, when does it become a problem? When it becomes a problem. The important thing is to understand that we aren't to follow the traditions and the precepts of men and call them doctrine as commandments, and don't weigh them the same and give them the same value as love one another, love your neighbor as yourself, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And we look at these things to say, okay, you might not agree with the fact that there's a kitchen downstairs. And there are some churches that do not have a kitchen downstairs. Okay. I don't see that from Jeff's perspective as a scriptural issue, because if it was and I was worshiping here, that would be an issue with me. I know some people have an issue with potlucks, but not because of potlucks, just because they don't like the germs. So they don't go. That's a true story here at this church. And that's why I always ask them when they come, are you going to come to potluck? And they're like, no, I'm not coming. I was like, well, we're having, finger foods, and that really freaks them out. But the thing is we need to take the perspective as we look at our differences and traditions, that we look at it as with that eye and the leaning towards grace. To understand that, if Raleigh and Julia write a check before they go to Florida, first off and foremost, thank you for thinking and being so thoughtful and purposeful ahead of time to do so. That's prayerful, that they've been in, they do that. As opposed to saying, well, did you write 4 separate checks or 8 separate checks? Where do you draw the line? I want to draw the line on grace and in grace and not worry about those little detail type things. Miss Johnny, you had your hand up and time has ran out, but I'm going to let you go because you've taught 5th and 6th grade now for 10 years straight. So you get to go ahead.
Well, I think the parents really ought to be more considerate and get the kids in class. That's one thing I harp on. Get the children there.
Okay. Miss Johnny said she thinks that the parents need to get the children to class. And that's one thing she says she harps on. That's a word you don't hear very much anymore, harps on, or it's like kind of like putting on airs. But the thing is that, we have a responsibility, first and foremost, as elders, to keep false teaching out of the flock. And you have responsibility in your homes to keep false teachings out from your children, because in today's world, we deal with colleges and education, whether it's elementary to where they're teaching sex education to handing out, prophylactics at elementary schools in some places and in middle school. We are dealing with a Satan who is a predator of our children and of our families, of our homes, and of our church. We need to be on guard and ready to stand firm, convicted in what we believe in. Brian's going to lead us in a song here, song 938 or something. 934. So if there's anything on your heart, if you'd like the prayers of the church, or if there's anything we can do for you, if you want to obey the gospel, I know that this wasn't a gospel message type class, but we're looking at things in God's word to make sure that they hold to the pattern, hold to what's in the box, hold to what is true, and always worshiping him in spirit and truth. If there's anything we do, please come while we stand and sing.